Genesis 34. All right, we'll start off with a simple question, and we'll get into one of the harder passages in Genesis as far as the events that transpire. I'll try to handle it delicately or appropriately. But the question is, what is justice? No big deal, right? What's justice? Very good. Justice? What's that? All right, so justice is missing. Okay, very good. In order for it to be missing, it must have been present at some point, right? So how would we know it if we saw it? Right? What is justice?
The right thing being done.
The right thing being done? That's good.
Define right.
Define right?
Not technically right in our eyes of it. Yeah, I mean, even that you can't have justice if you have a subjective view of right and wrong.
That's true.
Say that.
Consequences of the actions.
There's consequences of the actions, right?
Righting a wrong.
Righting a wrong, right? Okay. Is it simple to enact justice? No.
Just take the Ten Commandments and just look at those and say, if you violate this, then this is going to happen.
Okay. And then justice would involve the proper amount of consequence for the violation of that? Right? Okay. Okay. It applies to everybody. And justice for all, right? And the cynic says justice for some. Justice for those who are well connected, right?
It's not a level playing field.
There's not a level playing field, is there? Okay. Ask the question because we're going to get into that question could be thought of as we study the entire scripture. Because one of the things that justice, the idea of justice, one of the things it implies is that there is a right. And by consequence, there is a wrong. Anything that is not part of the right is part of the wrong. And then it comes down to, well, how do you define right and wrong, right? And one of the things we're very good at is defining right and wrong according to our own feelings or our own whims or what's going to best suit us, right? But in this passage specifically, we're going to come into a situation where an injustice will occur. The injustice that's going to occur, however, the language of the text lets us know that it is wrong, but in today's world, it's likely that the injustice that occurred would be passed off more as, well, that's just a moral preference that you have. And yet the scripture is going to lay down that it is immoral. And then the question becomes, what is the proper way to deal with injustice? Right? So Genesis chapter 34, we end chapter 33 with this beautiful section where Jacob has had his name changed to Israel, and he builds this altar that means the God of Israel. But one of the things that's important to notice is that when he meets with his brother Esau, Jacob tells his brother, I'm going to go here to this area. But then as the text goes on, Jacob goes to a different area. He does not go to the place he said he was going to go to. And more importantly, Jacob does not go to the place that God called him to. So briefly, go back with me to Genesis chapter 31, and let's look at verse 13. In Genesis chapter 31, verse 13, this is God speaking to Jacob now, and he has been with Laban, and he has married these two wives, and he's had children. And in Genesis chapter 31, verse 13, God is speaking to Jacob and says, I am the God of Bethel, where thou anointest the pillar, and where thou vowedest a vow unto me. And Jacob's vow was, if you can bring me back to the land of my father, I will serve you. And Bethel is the land of Jacob's family. Remember, he has this huge fight, deception of his brother Esau, and Jacob is sent to his family. But the next time we see Jacob, when he has the scene in which the ladder is there and God visits with him, he's staying the night. He's not traveled that far. He's not traveled out of the land of his father. And he promised God, I will serve you if you can bring me back to the land. And God says here in Genesis 31:13, arise, get thee out from this land, and return unto the land of thy kindred. So Jacob is returned. Now we're back in Genesis chapter 34. He has gotten back in the land of his kindred and doesn't quite go, as most scholars have noted, doesn't quite return back to where he's supposed to go. He does not go to Bethel. Instead, he goes somewhere else. Okay. All of our choices have consequences, right? The challenge is we cannot always anticipate the degree of those consequences. Chapter 34. And Dinah, whose name means praise, the daughter of Leah, which she bare unto Jacob. So Dinah is the child of Jacob and Leah. She went out to see the daughters of the land. And this land is a place called Shalem, which we would today pronounce as Salem. The name actually means peace. So what's happened is Jacob, if we go back to verse 18, Jacob came to Shalem, a city of Shechem. And Shechem is a place, and it is also the name of a character in this text. It is in the land of Canaan, when he came there from Padan Aram, and he pitched his tent before the city. There are some benefits to being in the city and being close to the city here. He buys a piece of land from a man named Hamer, and Hamer, in the original, his name means ass in the King James, like a donkey, right? And the thing about donkeys is they're very stubborn. He buys this land from Hamer, Shechem's father. He pays 100 pieces of money. So he's allowed to be there. He's paid the money. He owns the land. And his daughter Dinah, in chapter 34, goes into the city to see the daughters of the land. And Josephus, the historian, says more than likely Dinah went into the city because there was a festival going on, right? Matthew Henry will say that Dinah goes into a festival and she has gone alone. Now, who in here, especially those of you who are under the age of 25, doesn't like a good party, right? I want to go. There's this event happening, right? Let's go to this thing. And those of us who are over the age of 25, occasionally we like a certain party, right? If the parking's good and we don't have to walk too far and the music's not too loud and they have the food we want, we can go home before bedtime, right? But when we were younger, let's go. I mean, not that these were necessary parties, but freshman year of college, I remember staying up all night in Steven Sardone's room and falling asleep on his pile of dirty laundry. And I was thinking, this is living. I don't have my brother down the hallway. I don't have mom telling me to go to bed. I'm just, man, class, who cares, right? We're hanging out and we're talking and being absolute idiots, and I'm sleeping on dirty laundry. This is it. And that's Dinah, as a young person, she wants, let's go see this thing. Let's go have a good time, right? Okay. In modern terms, even in ancient terms, but especially modern terms, anytime we go to a festival, if you will, it's always best to go not alone, right? Especially a woman. It's best that you have probably more than one friend even, right? To go in pairs, to go in trios and quartets, because we cannot trust each other, right? And I had it here in my notes. I'm going to read it because one of the things we have to come and understand is there is no place and there is none of us who are immune to sin. So while some places and some people really telegraph their sin and their wickedness, like we can look at some people and go, I need to stay away from him, or I should not go near here, or her, or that place is not a place to go. There is, under the sun, there is no utopia. So that's why even if you come to a church, and even a good church, even if you go to a good school, Christian college, marry a good person, there's gonna be problems that arise, that come, right? And we're going to see here in Jacob, he had no idea what was about to happen, and I doubt Dinah did too. And it is reasonable to speculate, unfortunately, Dinah is not even cared about enough. When she's born, there's nothing really said about her in the text. Her mom doesn't seem really excited, and Dinah's being allowed to just go off on her own. And talking with someone the other day who said to me she could not believe, being raised in a Christian home, could not believe that her parents were fine to just drop her off at the university that she wanted to attend when she thinks about it now. Like, what were my parents thinking? I was alone. I had no spiritual friends with me. I had no one to help me combat all of the temptations that are going to be surrounding us, right? So she goes into this party. Verse 2, Shechem, the son of Hamor the Hivite, prince of the country, saw her. He took her and lay with her and defiled her. Now, this is not the same situation that we see in the story of David, in which Amnon had a friend, and Amnon's in love with his half-sister, and his friend tells him, here's how you can deceive your half-sister so that you can have your way with her. And as Amnon tries that, the young woman says, we shouldn't do this. This is not right. Amnon proceeds with it anyways, and as soon as it's done, he hates her, and he loathes her, and he wants nothing to do with her. There's something a little bit different that goes on here. She is defiled, and in the original Hebrew, she is humiliated. Now, does that mean that Dinah is ashamed of what's happened? It's very likely that it is. But we're going to see here later in the text that even if Dinah is okay with it, and even if Shechem is okay with what he's done, that does not mean that sin has not occurred. And the reason I bring that up, and I'm going to borrow from the Pride and Prejudice story, in which there's one of the sisters in Pride and Prejudice. She goes off with a man she ought not to run away with. He's not a good man, but she's in love. And he's in love, and it's all fun, and it's all playful. And of course, some of the wiser people in the family know you're heading down a really dangerous path here, even though it feels good right now. And even in today's culture, as we're working through a show from the 1980s, which some of the things that they say and do, there's no way they'd be allowed today, right? Some of their actually blunt honesty. But even in that show, while it still is much more tempered than modern shows, still the way that show treats sex is very not in accordance with Scripture, right? As long as there is consent, and of course we know the path that's gone, well, what is the age of consent, right? But Shechem here has seen a woman that he found attractive. He has, as some scholars have speculated, forced himself upon her. And then other scholars have said he didn't have to force himself. He's the prince. She's a young woman. She's attractive. She's having fun. He's handsome. And he woos her. And he wins him to herself. And they engage in this relationship. And for all we know, while she has been spiritually, which has an effect on the whole atmosphere of the world, has been humiliated, look at what happens here with Shechem. Verse 3. His soul clave unto Dinah, the daughter of Jacob, and he loved the damsel and spake kindly unto the damsel. So this is the ancient modern love song. As long as we love each other, it's okay. Verse 4. Shechem spake unto his father Hamor, saying, get me this damsel to wife. So even in a pagan culture, he's still doing what is relatively okay in that world. If we think back to when Abraham and Sarah, and then later Isaac and Rebekah went into a pagan land, both Abraham and Isaac knew we live in a land where some men take women as they want, and they'll take your wife, even your wife, so we'll act like you're our sister. And they knew if they think you're our sister, they'll take you, but they won't kill me. It was a really bad move on both those men's part. And here we have a woman who is unmarried. Shechem, I can take what I want, and I'll be kind about it, and it'll be romantic, and we'll be in love. Shechem's not thinking he's doing anything wrong. He's within his relative allowance. Now watch what happens here. Jacob heard that Shechem had defiled Dinah his daughter. Now his sons were with his cattle in the field, and Jacob held his peace until they came. It's a good thing to do. You've just gotten some terrible news. What is the proper response, right? How ought the defiled person to be treated? Someone who has been taken advantage of, whether by force or through manipulation and immaturity. How ought they to be treated? And I ask that question here to us as the church because it's in the church, right? Whether before our lives as Christians, maybe in the immaturity of our young Christianhood, we are all trespassing upon people and taking things from people we ought not to take and giving things over that we ought not to give. So what's the proper way to treat while still holding the line of what's right and wrong? And then, of course, how ought the one who takes advantage, how ought they to be treated? What is the proper way? And as some more recent writers have talked about, and when they're dealing with their children, let them know, here is what's right. Do what's right, and we will instruct you. But if you transgress, please come to us. We will help you. There's one way we ought not to treat those who have been defiled or humiliated, whether to no fault of their own or simply have been wooed or duped. One thing that we cannot do is cast them off. But we can also not say it's all okay. And the world's response is we can remove the right and try to get rid of the guilt, and the problems that have come from that are undeniable. We don't have time to go into all of them. You can still hold to here's what's right. There's going to be some consequences that come as a result, but we cannot cast them off. Watch what happens next. Jacob is staying quiet. He's holding his peace. Verse 6, Hamor, the father of Shechem, went out unto Jacob to commune with him, and the sons of Jacob came out of the field when they heard what happened, and they were grieved, and they were wroth, because Shechem had wrought folly in Israel in lying with Jacob's daughter, which thing ought not to be done. It is sexual intercourse outside of marriage is one of the oldest tropes in all of Scripture. It ought not to happen. It's going to happen, but it ought not to. So when it does, what is the proper response? There is a proper way for those of us to respond when we know that it's happened, but then there is a question of those who have committed it, how ought they to respond? And one of the faults here with Shechem, we're going to see, as one scholar has noted, Shechem never apologizes. He just tries to go on as if everything's okay. And to Jacob's fault, he is not going to do anything about it. There's one thing to say, I'm going to take my time and I'm going to think about this. The text gives us no indication that Jacob is thinking. We know Jacob knows how to plot. Jacob's very wise. He's very clever. So what happens is Shechem says, I love this woman. I've taken her. I've not even asked her father's permission before I took her, but now that I've got her and she's in my land, I'm now going to ask for her hand in marriage. It's a bit backwards here. So Hamor shows up. The sons are angry. Verse 8, Hamor communed with the sons of Jacob, saying, the soul of my son Shechem longeth for your daughter. I pray you give her him to wife. So the dad starts off with the argument of, my son loves your daughter, right? What a great way to start any fight, right? With love. And of course, love can be twisted and manipulated. And we have just a very current situation, not on the level of love, but just to think of what's happening with the recent votes. There's the vote for the levy, right? Regardless of what we think about the levy, there's one poster that says, vote for the levy. Why? Do it for the kids. Oh, that's a really emotional argument. Who doesn't want to do anything for the kids? You would have to be a monster, right? So Hamor comes, and the very first thing he says is not, hey, my son did wrong, and my son's here to apologize. He doesn't do that. He just shows up as if everything's fine and says, my son loves your daughter. Let's let him get married. Then he encourages intermarriage between the Jews and the non-Jews. He promises land and possessions, and he offers to pay whatever the wedding price is. Look at the text. Let's make ye marriages with us, and give your daughters unto us, and take our daughters unto you. And ye shall dwell with us, and the land shall be before you. Dwell and trade ye therein, and get you possessions therein. And Shechem said unto her father and unto her brethren, let me find grace in your eyes, and what ye shall say unto me I will give. Ask me never so much dowry. Ask me whatever dowry you want and give, and I will give according as ye shall say unto me, but give me the damsel to wife, right? So we're not ever going to apologize. We're not ever going to mention our transgression. We're just going to act as if everything is okay. We're going to try to make things right here in our eyes. And if you make this union with us, look at all the benefits that will come to you, right? The cliche line, everyone has their price, right? And we get entangled in certain relationships sometimes out of no doing of our own, but we have a choice at certain points in our life. How much further will we go into this thing? And as other scholars have noted, it is reasonable for Jacob in this situation to have told Hamor, we are not going to do that. We must do something differently. We cannot just go on as if everything's okay. But Jacob stays silent. He says nothing. And whenever those who are in the right seat of authority do nothing, then what are the people to do? They are often going to take matters into their own hands. Here's just several stories or film examples of where characters have taken matters into their own hand, and we'll leave it up for you to wrestle with the stories if you know about them. Did they do it correctly or to too much of a degree? All right? The story of Time to Kill. This is John Grisham's very first novel. It's turned into a film. A young child is savagely mistreated. The father decides to take justice in his own hand, and he kills the two perpetrators there in the courthouse, and the story takes off from there. Boondock Saints. I'm not really recommending this one, but it was a big hit in the early 2000s. Two brothers up in Boston. There's a bunch of crime happening, so they're going to become the vigilantes. And one of the things that film does really fascinatingly is at the end of the film, you have this news reporter interviewing all these people in Boston, and you're getting all these different responses. Oh, they're criminals. Oh, they're terrible. And the other's like, yeah, they're doing the right thing, right? And their whole argument is the law is not coming in. How about Batman, right? This is the vigilante, right? He's taking matters into his own hands. The Equalizer. And I'm talking about the show from the 90s, and then I'm talking about Denzel Washington's reboot, and I'm not mentioning anything about Queen Latifah's reboot, all right? Okay. But The Equalizer, someone who will take justice into their own hands for those who cannot find justice. And then there's one last story I'll recommend. It's from a short story called Killings, and it's a story about a young man, 21 years old, who gets involved with a woman who's been recently divorced from a man who is extremely violent, and the whole town knows that he's violent. One day, the man, the ex-husband, beats up the young man. The young man doesn't do anything. His parents are shocked. They're a little bit older. They don't do anything. But what do you do? And then the ex-husband kills the son. And from there on, the whole story plays out of, what are you going to do about that? And the big conundrum comes when the man who commits murder is let out on bail. He gets time before he has to go to court, and he gets to walk around the town. And the mom of the son who was killed sees him in town. And the dad of the son sees him in town. And everyone in the town who loved this young man see this murderer just walking free. So what are you going to do? And Sissy Spacek plays the wife. Tom Wilkinson, who recently passed away, unfortunately, he plays the father. It's a fascinating film, and the film is called In the Bedroom. And the father makes a decision to take justice into his own hands. And the way that that film ends is he has committed the deed, and he returns home, and he gets in bed. His wife knows what's happened, but they're not going to talk about it. And Tom Wilkinson lays down on the side of his bed, and the camera just comes right in on his face. And you can see in his face all that he's going to have to deal with. It's not over yet. But he took matters into his own hand because, well, where was the law? What is justice? So those are just some examples of situations where this is an idea that is still being grappled with, still today. So watch what Jacob's sons do. Jacob's sons, to borrow something a little lighter from another TV show that I also don't recommend, but there's a character in the show called New Girl, and he always takes pranks too far. So if the prank is, hey, let's take his keys and hide them, the friend's prank is, let's throw the keys in a ditch and set the car on fire. That'll be hilarious. That's not a prank, right? That's psychotic. So watch what the sons do. Verse 13, the sons of Jacob answered Shechem and Hamor, his father, deceitfully, and said, because he had defiled Dinah, their sister, they said unto them, we cannot do this thing. to give our sister to one that is uncircumcised. For that were a reproach unto us. But in this will we consent unto you, if ye will be as we be, that every male of you be circumcised. Then we will give our daughter unto you, and we will take our daughters to us, your daughters to us, and we will dwell with you, and we will become one people. But if ye will not hearken unto us to be circumcised, then will we take our daughter, and we will be gone. So Dinah is still in the possession of Shechem. Verse 18, their words pleased Hamor, and Shechem, Hamor's son. And the young man, Shechem, deferred not to do the thing. He got to it right away because he had delight in Jacob's daughter. So even though Shechem has done things he ought not to have done, we can still give the guy a nod of he's still doing better than a lot of other people. He did not just have his way with Dinah and then cast her off. He's trying to go about the right way, at least to some extent. He was more honorable than all the house of his fathers, what it says of Shechem. Now, the word honor here in the Hebrew is the word kabod. It's the word we get for crown. And it has the idea of something being very heavy, something being weighty. And something can be heavy in a good sense, right? Oh, that's an honorable woman. That's an honorable man. They have this kind of air about them where, all right, let's pay them respect. But honor can also be something heavy in a bad sense. And sometimes people who think that they are greater than they really are, think of the damages that they can cause in people's life. But also what Shechem has done, he has committed a great transgression. He took something that he wanted. And political and social dynamics aside of the ancient world and how they compare with the modern world, we still have something as eternal until God comes and restores everything, the theological issue that's always at play. My will versus your will. My will versus the will of what is eternally true and good and beautiful. My will versus the will of God. And Shechem has transgressed that, and now Jacob's sons, they're wanting something to be done, and they're going to exercise their will. God's not done things the way that we think it should be done here. Our Father's not stepping in. Instead of us doing something prudently and wisely, but doing something, we're going to overkill here. So Shechem's behavior is going to prove to be a burdensome stone to all of his people here, okay? I think of the story of Chicken Little. He's got a really heavy message, right? The sky is falling. And because he was really adamant about that in the original story, it leads to the destruction of the entire town. Not because the sky fell, but because the fox says, come hide in my den. I've got a nice fallout shelter for you, right? And it leads everyone to their destruction. So watch what happens here. All of the city, Hamor and all the people of Shalem, they all get circumcised. And 3 days in, when they're in great pain and can't do anything, Simeon and Levi, and we'll see them again in Genesis 49. Look at verse 25. Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brethren, took each man his sword and came upon the city boldly and slew all the males. And they slew Hamor and Shechem his son with the edge of the sword. And they took Dinah out of Shechem's house and went out. And the sons of Jacob came upon the slain and spoiled the city. They took their sheep and their oxen. They took all their wealth, verse 29, and their little ones and their wives and all that was in the house. Overkill. They went way too far here. Verse 30. Now watch Jacob's response. I know I've got to wrap us up here at the end. Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, ye have troubled me to make me stink among the inhabitants of the land, among the Canaanites and the Perizzites. How often have our parents told us, or we told our children, don't embarrass us. What you do reflects on us, right? So what I'm driving at here with Jacob has two very legitimate concerns. You have brought shame upon my name in the land, right? That's a legitimate concern. Look at what he says next. I, being few in number, the Canaanites and Perizzites shall gather themselves together against me and slay me, and I shall be destroyed, I and my house. You and I are going to be killed. We're outnumbered. And the way of man tends towards escalation. You do this, I'm going to do this. You do that, oh yeah, I'm going to take it some bigger. So Jacob's response has two legitimate concerns. I'm now ashamed among the people. My name is no good. And if they wanted to, they could outnumber us and kill all of us. As other scholars have noted, however, that's where Jacob's concern is. We don't hear any concern about Jacob with, my daughter was mistreated. She was taken advantage of, and that was not correct. And when I had an opportunity here to make some sort of union with these people and their money and their power, and probably out of concern, because how do I tell Shechem you're wrong? What if he doesn't like what I tell him? But in his silence, now he's going to rebuke his sons with legitimate concerns, but they fall short of what really should have happened. And then the sons will respond in a way where they dodge the situation. Verse 31, and they said, should Shechem deal with our sister as with a harlot? Should he have dealt with it? Or the word he here is, are they talking to Jacob? Is that how you should have treated our sister, Dad? Now, the question is a good question, but it is dodging the issue of we overstepped our boundaries. We should not have done what we've done. And oftentimes when we get into a conflict, we don't want to admit our fault. Jacob's not admitting his fault, and the sons aren't going to admit theirs. But they are implying that their father has failed to protect their daughter and to defend their sister. And there's more that we could say here. Shechem did try to correct his relationship with Dinah to some extent. But as one scholar noted, Shechem and his father never really came out and said, hey, we were wrong in this part. Please forgive us in that. How can we make this right according to what is right, and not just to how can we kind of cover this up in a way. So it is worth contemplating, what should Jacob have done? How could he have held Shechem accountable without overstepping the boundaries and waging war? And it's important to understand that all the unions we have, all of them come with troubles. Some have more troubles than others. So it's wise who we think, who are we going to make our friends? Who is it we're going to marry? Where are we going to go to church? Where are we going to go to school? Who are we going to make as our business partners? Who are we going to align ourselves with? And then sometimes we have no say in the matter. But we ought to tread wisely with our fellow man, because none of us can really be trusted at all times. We're going to fail and cross the line here. But I don't want to end there. We will move into the next chapter so that we end on a better note. Chapter 35, God comes to Jacob and says, go up to Bethel and dwell there. Make there an altar unto God that appeared unto thee when thou fleddest from the face of Esau thy brother. God's basically coming in saying, go back to where I told you to go. Go do the right thing. Jacob said unto his household, put away the strange gods that are among you, and be clean, and change your garments, and let us arise and go up to Bethel, and I will make there an altar unto God, who answered me in the day of my distress, and was with me in the way in which I went. And they gave unto Jacob all the strange gods which were in their hand, and all their earrings which were in their ears, and Jacob hid them under the oak which was by Shechem. We have a purification here happening. God calls him to go do the thing he should have originally done, and then we see that, man, Jacob, who's anointed by God, is allowed and knows that his family is practicing serving other idols. Let's get this kind of stuff out of the family, and let's go and worship God, confess sins, and praise God. And we see in verse 5, God in his mercy for Jacob, as they leave, the terror of God was upon the cities that were round about them, and they did not pursue after the sons of Jacob. We see here that the sons of Jacob have behaved horribly. Jacob has behaved not very well. The people of Shalem did not behave very well either. There is blame that can be put on everyone. Even in Dinah's situation, you shouldn't have been in that situation alone. Some scholars have speculated that I think it's Matthew Henry even, who speculates she snuck off on her own. So you can really stand back and point out wrong, various degrees. What is the proper response? And we have here that while we will probably fail in our responses, God's response, he will always exercise justice correctly. And here, as one person noted it on the study of Genesis, if this is how a blessed family behaves, and what happens with a blessed family, how would an unblessed family go? What would the way be for them? But we'll come back next week and we'll get into what happens now with the life of Jacob and his family, and we'll go from there. Thank you.